Man exacts the perfect revenge on his neighbor who kept blocking his car inside the apartment parking lot. Driving can bring us some mixed experiences. While it can be fun going on a ride with friends, traffic and rude drivers can easily spoil our day. This story is about a mechanic whose plans faced repeated obstacles from a neighbor's car. When things went too far, the mechanic, known as Angry Aussie Gamer on Reddit, decided to give it back to his neighbor, and what he did must have taught his dear friend a lesson. It might have caused a lot of problems for the neighbor, but for us, it was utterly funny and amusing. Our mechanic friend is a workaholic, but also believes in taking a break. Angry Aussie is not what his name suggests. He's a very cool guy, happy in his life, and a wonderful friend. He likes being on the road with his mates. It was a long day at work. Angry Aussie had been working tirelessly all day to make sure all his customers were served as expected. The work of a mechanic is of course tedious, but he also enjoyed his work, and that made it easy for him. He was also excited about how good the evening would be. He with his mates had decided to have a night out of town on the roads and make it a memorable one. After finishing the day's work, when Angry Aussie was back home getting ready for his friends, he saw something that instantly soured his mood, and he had a frown on his face. As he got down to the garage to pull his car over, he saw that some strange car had blocked his parking in such an abrupt manner that it was impossible for him to roll his car. He was stunned by the irresponsible parking of the car's owner, but decided to wait for him to return and move his car. It was a long wait. Angry Aussie was now actually losing his cool, but there was no time to waste. The evening was still there waiting for him, and his friends were too. When the owner of the wretched car didn't turn up for some more time, he had no choice but to call his friend to pick him up. Did the evening go as he had planned? For the next couple of weeks, Angry Aussie's car was frequently blocked by the rude car that had first shown that evening. He now found himself stuck in the garage so frequently that sometimes he also had to opt for other ways of conveyance. The only way Angry Aussie could contact the rude car owner was through written notes that he used to stick on the windscreen of the car, to which he didn't get any reply. The notes did not change the perpetrator's behavior. He couldn't believe the extent to which he was being irritated by the other owner. Things were now turning worse. Every time Angry Aussie had a plan waiting, the rude car was waiting for him as well. So many times had the car blocked his way that Angry Aussie was now scared to go to the parking lot. He knew his car would be blocked. Angry Aussie thought what anyone else would have thought. He guessed that the offender was a drunkard who forgot to remove his car from the parking every night he returned from the bar. But this was only a decent theory. He had no proof to identify the perpetrator. When he got no idea of getting rid of the car, Angry Aussie turned towards the internet to see some ways people have gotten rid of bad parking examples. Now he was a good man and did not want to take a rude step. He had to think of a different strategy. The main problem for him was that he never knew when to expect his car blocked. The blockage was making him late on an unpredictable basis. That is why he never got to confront him and address the issue. The tension was rising for Angry Aussie because he had something planned with his friends which he couldn't afford to miss, and before the day he arrived, he had to sort it out with a driver to make sure that he's not blocked on the day of the obligation. It was not often that all 6 of his closest friends would come together and have a weekend off. They had a wonderful plan in place and he couldn't afford to miss it. This was a special trip, and to let this happen, Angry Aussie had to make sure that he wasn't parked in again. He thought that only enforcement authorities could help him in this matter and decided to take the case to them. Not to directly jump to the police and the towing company, he first decides to bring the matter to the notice of the building manager. Angry Aussie was surprised that instead of helping him, the building manager didn't even take any interest in identifying the car owner. Now that he'd been turned down by the building manager, he decided to get more serious. This was the last time Angry Aussie was ready to find himself parked in. One morning when he found the car blocking him yet again, he called for the towing company. Unfortunately for him, his car was parked on the 3rd floor at the parking lot, and the towing company disagreed to provide any service. Angry Aussie was dejected and finally decided to take matters in his own hands. He had to do something after everyone he looked towards denied any help. He had a few ideas about which he was thinking to act on. The days were passing and the upcoming trip was now not very far. Angry Aussie was flipping through options before he finally locked himself on his plan. He had decided how he was going to get rid of the driver and his car and finally get back to his normal life. Not to forget that Angry Aussie was a garage mechanic. He looked towards his auto shop for tools to get him out of the jam. This time our friend got lucky. He found exactly what he was looking for. It was perfectly what he could use to teach the rude and irresponsible car owner a lesson. With the new tool he had with him, Angry Aussie was assured that on the day of the trip he'd finally do the necessary to make sure that the driver would never again try to block his parking. The plan was in place, and then came the day of the trip. Finally, the day had come and Angry Aussie was stress-free about getting parked early in the morning. His friends would turn up anytime, and soon he'd find out if he'd have to use the tool he had searched for. When Angry Aussie with his friends headed to the garage, he found his car blocked in the worst possible state. But he didn't lose his cool and ran straight back to his house to grab the strange metal contraption. When he was back with it, everyone could see how he decided to get his vehicle out. The metal contraption was a vehicle positioning jack. This could be used to move the vehicle anywhere they wanted, but the question was where? Would Angry Aussie just clear his way and park the car anywhere else? Would it teach the driver a lesson? Angry Aussie explained to his friends how the jack and wheels in the tool would help him to lift the parked car and move it wherever they desired. Each of them had a grin on their face. They knew this was going to be fun. They got in their positions. Before they could get into any action, Angry Aussie wanted to make sure that the area was secured. Angry Aussie went around the garage to make sure that no one was looking and people didn't take them to be thieves planning to pick a car. While they weren't doing anything illegal, it would have looked differently for a security guard looking at them carrying out the mission. They would have landed in serious trouble if spotted, and the person who had caused so many problems could have got the chance to sue them. It was a 2-ton car that gave them a tough time moving it around. It seemed to be as stubborn as its owner, but the 7 of them, as fast as they could, start to move the car to the place where they could park it. They kept moving it towards a distant, deep and dark corner where Angry Aussie had asked them to. As they came close to where they had to park it, Angry Aussie's plan became quite apparent. They knew where they were heading and how bad it would be for the other driver. The spot that he'd chosen for parking the interrupting car was in the corner of the garage, a place where the car could fit easily, but we can't say anything about getting it out of there. This was his perfect revenge, and things could not have been better for Angry Aussie and worse for the other driver. The car was finally moved to the position where they wanted it to be. The funny thing was that the driver would easily get in and out of the car, but moving it around would be another matter. The only thing that could get him out of there would be the tool that placed the car there in the first place. With the help of the tool, they had moved the car side by side and placed it there, but it was certain that getting out would be a tedious task. The driver would have to angle the car forward and backwards a lot of times to get it out. Considering the previous parking experience of the driver, it was certain that he'd have a hard time getting his car out of the situation. One could only guess that he'd hire a towing company to get the job done. The parking was on the 3rd floor. Would they oblige? Angry Aussie was extremely satisfied and happy with what he'd done. The torture that he'd been going through had left him dejected and frustrated, and he was waiting for the day he'd confront the other driver. Though that never happened, he got to plot his revenge. After taking one final look at the car and ensuring it would be difficult to get the car out without bumping it once or twice, all 7 of them sped off for their planned weekend. Parking had never been so fun for any of them. One of them joked about them being slightly different from a typical parking service. While Angry Aussie was away enjoying his break, he couldn't resist thinking of what happened to the car. Is it still parked, or had the driver managed to get it out? How happy would Angry Aussie be to see him try to park the car out of that situation? When Angry Aussie returned from the holiday, he found his spot open to park. He then ran to have a look at the car that he'd parked, and he was wishing to see the car still there. And what he saw there surprised him. Understandably, the car was still there. He had a smile on his face. The vehicle that had caused so much problems for him was stuck at a spot where it wasn't even able to get out of. He wondered if the driver of the car even found out his car was parked there. The rude driver must have learned a lesson after what had been offered to him when he decided to mess with the wrong guy. He'd never dare to do it to anyone again. After what seemed to be an experience, Angry Aussie felt another wonderful thing. After a few days, the car was finally moved, but the unimaginable happened. Angry Aussie never faced the parking problem again. He never saw the problem car again. He finally owned his parking again after a long time. While this was just one case of territorial vandalism, they exist everywhere. The clever mechanic with the help of his friends might have gotten some revenge, but this isn't always the case. Sometimes people like these cause serious problems for the rightful owners of the property.